I want you to imagine you are walking along a beach, ice cream in hand. You can hear the waves, see seabirds, seashells, and seaweed, maybe even smell a fish and chip shop. At some point in everyone's lives, they have picked up shells on a beach, tucked them away into their pockets, treasures saved for a later date. It might have been mussels, or cockles, or even an oyster shell. These shells on the beach hint at life below the sea and sand, almost. Most of the oyster shells you will find are hundreds to thousands of years old. They're from reefs that are no longer there. They're an animal that we don't have in our waters anymore. This is because of overfishing. In the 1800s, the reefs left degraded and depleted. 30 million oysters per year were brought to shore in Edinburgh alone. The reef was the size of the current city. This is the story again and again across our ocean landscape. Life leaving the ocean. From corals to mangroves, from salt marshes to oysters. An oyster bed, or a reef, doesn't quite look like the ones you think of when you think of Finding Nemo, but there's something similar, a dense carpet of life. When oysters grow, they stick together. They form structure and stability, much like the foundations of a house. The nooks and crannies between these shells are an ideal home for small creatures to live, and these small creatures are great food for bigger animals. The shelter and this food attracts even bigger fish and then bigger animals like seals, and suddenly, once again, the reef and sea is teeming with life, and oysters are at the heart of it all. But the story of our seas is changing. We are in the UN Decade of Restoration. People are working to restore these habitats, like replanting a tree, but you're replanting an oyster. The seas are growing wild again. At first, we need to find out where the oysters were. We look at museums, historical records, we look into fishing observations. Once we know where they thrived, we can plan to put them back once more. We check the temperature of the sea, how salty the water is. And then we check if there is enough food so that the oysters can feed. Once we know where to put them, we start off by creating an artificial reef. Hundreds of thousands of shells to recreate that structure, stability, home. And already you see crabs and fish coming back. But once that reef is in place, it's time to put the oyster back in the sea and begin to restore for our future.